Probably should have done this beforehand, but do we have a clicker so that we can go through the slides? This was not originally the lesson that I was going to do when Terry texted me a couple weeks ago. But after hearing his lesson last week, I thought this might fit in, the idea that Jesus knows. If you remember from last week, Terry was talking about leadership, specifically about the hands of a leader, looking at Jesus and his hands and his carpentry work. And so I thought, let's continue with that idea of leadership. And what is it that makes a good leader? Well, I think Jesus answers that same idea when he talks about this idea of knowing individuals. He says there in the Gospel of John, in John chapter 10, that the Good Shepherd knows his sheep. And who is that Good Shepherd? Well, it is Jesus. Jesus knows his sheep. And so I think it's common for all of us to want to be known and to be seen. If you've ever been at work before and you've done something just above and beyond, you want your bosses to notice you, don't you? If you've done something for your spouse that maybe you don't typically do and you've gone out of your way, maybe it's cooking a special meal, you want them to see, don't you? And notice and give some gratitude. Or for us husbands, it might be going in and doing the dishes. Or maybe we took that extra time out in the yard to clear out whatever our wife has been bugging us about for the last couple of weeks. You want to be seen, you want to be noticed for those things. Now, there's also times where you might not want to be known. Maybe you did something that probably you shouldn't have at work, and you're like, oh, I hope the boss doesn't see this. Or maybe it's, I know for me personally, when my wife goes out of town, when she goes out of town, she cleans up the house very well. And she makes sure that when she gets back home, it's going to stay in that way that she left it. But if I'm at the house, I might be a little bit more laid back than when she's at the house. Things might not be picked up as well. That drink might sit there on the coffee table a little bit longer than it should. And then when she starts heading back home, or I know she's going to come home, I'll start cleaning up the day before to try to get it back to the way it was. Not going to be the way that she left it, but there was one day that she came back home early and I didn't know about it. And you can imagine the rush and the urgency in trying to get things back. Now, that wasn't necessarily to be known, but it was so that she didn't know the way that I left it when she was gone. We all have that desire, though, to be known for the good things that we do. And oftentimes, we're going through struggles, we're going through trials, and we're suffering with things, and we just think, nobody knows what it is that I'm going through. I first preached this lesson about 3 years ago. And this meant something personally to me because somebody was going through something in my life and they had asked me this same type of question. Well, nobody knows what I'm going through. Who can understand and sympathize with what I'm going through? No one sees what I'm dealing with. Well, if you open up your Bibles to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. And this is something that I wish that I would have said in that moment. And it's not something that's just earth-shattering that nobody's ever heard before, but I think it's something that we often need to be reminded of is there is somebody who knows and there is somebody who understands. Even when the world around you, even when your brethren, those within your local congregation, you feel like they don't understand and they can't sympathize with what you're going through, know this, what Jesus says and repeats to all 7 of the churches there in Asia Minor. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 2, he says, I know your deeds and your toil and perseverance, and that you cannot tolerate evil men, and you put to test those who call themselves apostles, and they are not, and you found them to be false. Over and over again, to every single one of the churches, Jesus says, I know. He doesn't say that, you know what, I've heard about the things that you've been struggling with. I'm going to assume, based off of my life here on earth, that I know what you're going through. He says he knows. He understands. And I think that's important for us. Jesus knows our works. He knows what it is that we're going through, what we're doing. And so Jesus knows your work. He knows their labor, what it is that they're doing. He knows their effort. He knows their perseverance. And that matters. That's important for us to be able to understand. There's so many things that go unseen within the work of a local body. Think about how much effort gets put into that audio equipment back there, who go and put together these slides for you. How often are they thanked for their efforts? Or the individuals that spend their mornings praying for those here in this local body. They don't want to be known. They don't care to be known. But I can guarantee you there are individuals here who are diligently praying for each and every one of you. Even though their service may not be seen, even though they're not like Terry standing up here in the pulpit, even though they're not one of the elders, even though they're not one of the deacons, there are individuals that are doing work unseen, behind the scenes, and they're okay with it. Because guess what? There is somebody who knows what they're doing. And a lot of times we think, well, nobody's going to notice if I do this. It's just a small deed, something that nobody else is going to see. And maybe we even start to question, is what I'm doing even worth it? Absolutely it's worth it. Because there is somebody who knows what it is that you're doing. He knows about your efforts. He knows about your labors. He knows about your perseverance. And there are going to be those quiet acts that you might do that go unseen. There might be those daily responsibilities of just being a Christian that nobody else sees or notices. Or maybe it's your continued faithfulness while you're struggling with something personally. And it just goes unrecognized by those around you. Listen to what Paul says there to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter. In verse 58. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. Your toil, your labor, it's not in vain. Why? Because the Lord knows. He sees every single act of obedience. He sees every moment where you persevered to do what was right. Do you truly believe that? Jesus also notes that he knows their suffering. He knows what it is that they're going through, what they're struggling with. And so, look over in Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, and verse 9. He doesn't just stop with knowing what they're doing. He speaks about the way that they endure. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. The blasphemy by those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. He knows their tribulation. He knows their suffering. And in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, as we read just moments ago, we have a high priest who can sympathize with us. A high priest who can understand what it is that we are going through. Jesus understands and recognized that he walked in suffering. He understood what suffering meant. He understood what rejection meant. He knows what grief looks like. He was a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest of griefs. And a lot of times when we think about Jesus and the things that he went through, I think sometimes we tend to forget about the way that he was rejected. Even by his own close personal friends, his apostles. Where were they when he went to the cross? They left. To have your own friends leave you in a time of need, in a time of suffering. When he prayed there in the garden, and his apostles continued to fall asleep. Not only that, but enduring the shame and the humiliation and the punishment and the pain and the suffering mentally and physically of the cross. You want to talk about a man who knows what suffering means. A man who came to this world being the Son of God, recognizing that he was going to come to this world and be rejected, yet still die for those individuals. Jesus knows about your suffering. He knows what it is that you're going through. And there are burdens that people carry that people just can't explain. Maybe it never gets fully explained. Things that you're going through where you feel like nobody's going to understand. And guess what? We all suffer in different ways. We're all going to suffer in ways that differ and vary from one another. The loss of a child, those who lost their children early versus those who lost their children later in life. They suffer differently though, but they still suffer with the loss of a child. Those who have various forms of cancer, they suffer and they go through things differently. The treatment might be different. The way that they handle things might be different. You can sit in a room full of people who are going through the exact same thing as you, but they might all be experiencing it differently. And guess what? You can sit in a room full of people that you call your friends and be suffering with something silently and still feel alone. But I hope that the fact that Jesus knows and your sympathizing high priest can bring you some comfort. He knows when you are tired. Think about all the tireless nights that Jesus had. All the times that he just tried to get away for a few minutes from the crowds and from his apostles. Just for a moment of silence, just for a moment of sleep. You want to talk about an individual who knew what tired was, it is Jesus. The one who knows when you're hurting. He knows when you feel like nobody else understands. But we need to understand that we are never alone. And also, Jesus knows our condition. And this is where things become more personal. Yes, he knows what it is that we're doing. He knows what it is that we're suffering. But he also knows our condition, because Jesus not only knows their work, he not only knows their condition. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 1, to the angel of the church in Sardis write, he who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars says this, I know your deeds, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 15, to the church in Laodicea, he writes, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. Jesus knew what it was that was going on in their hearts, where their hearts were. And so he sees beyond just the appearance. You think about the Pharisees and the Sadducees that were going out and trying to do things in order to be seen by individuals so that they could be seen as righteous and holy and set apart. Jesus sees past all of that. He doesn't just see their works. He doesn't just see their suffering. He knows what's in their heart. He knows why it is that they're doing what they're doing. And so he knows their condition. Are we doing things just out of routine this morning? Are we coming into this building, sitting in a pew just because it's what we do on Sunday? Are we doing it to just check off some sort of list of expectations that God has for us? Or are you doing it because you want to be here? Because you love the one who loved you so much? A lot of times we see people and we see their activity. You might look at Terry and think about all the great work that he does. And I'll agree, Terry does great work. But there's nobody who knows the heart other than God. There's nobody who can discern what is going on in the heart other than God. You might look at the elders and all the work that they do. But just know that there's no one who understands and sees the heart other than God. He sees the things that we try to hide. You know, those things that we talked about where you try to hide from your boss? Or maybe you're walking down the road and you trip and almost wipe out, but you catch yourself and you hope nobody saw. Yeah, he sees those things too. Jesus sees the struggles that we try to hide, the sins that we continue to struggle with. He sees the weaknesses that we just try to manage. He sees the sin that we hope no one finds out about. Jesus knows, and guess what? That can feel uncomfortable. Those skeletons in the closet, he already knows about them. But he doesn't reveal these things. He doesn't reveal this idea and concept of knowing us in order to just shame us into obedience. He reveals them in order to save us. Look over in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Paul writes about his thorn in the flesh. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. This is Jesus' response to that. He says in verse 9, "And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me." Paul's suffering with something. He's prayed about it over and over again, hoping that this thorn could be removed. And the response is, my grace is sufficient. You know, the things that we struggle with, the things that we don't know how to handle, or we don't know the direction that we should go, whether it be left, right, up, down, when we're struggling with decisions to make, when we're struggling with what it is that we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to go about it. Maybe you've gotten a call about a diagnosis and you don't know what you're going to do. Guess what? There is somebody who knows what it is that you're going through. And those things that you're suffering with, the things that you're struggling with, they can be used to his glory. I'll tell you right now, we have individuals that come into services all around the world who have chronic back pain. And it hurts them to sit in a pew. But I can guarantee you they're here for Bible class and they're here for worship service. You've got individuals who deal with all sorts of things, whether it be mental or physical, that still come to this service, that still diligently pray each and every morning. They're not doing it just to be seen by others so that others can have pity on them. They're doing it because they enjoy being in the presence of those of like minds. To be encouraged, to be admonished, to be built up. And guess what? They might start to wonder at the end of the day, is it worth it for me to even come? And guess what? Jesus knows. This lesson can either be one of two things for you. It can either bring you comfort or it can leave you terrified. For those who are striving as Christians, those who have continued to live their life as faithful, Jesus knows. And I hope that brings you comfort. If you're striving to walk with him, if you're striving to do what's right and live that righteous life, then I hope that this brings peace that passeth all understanding. That He knows your efforts, that He knows your suffering, and He knows your weakness. And because He knows, you can come to Him in prayer. And He will hear you. Now, for those who have lived lives that are unrepentant, those who have lived lives that haven't been right, Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13 tells us that there is no creature hidden from His sight. That means the sin that no one else knows about, the sin that nobody else sees, Jesus knows. The life that looks right on the outside, where you're checking off all the boxes, but on the inside is a heart of misery and torment and sin and hatred, Jesus knows. The heart that's just not right, He knows. And if someone is not right with God, that's not comfort. That is a terrifying place to be. Do not fear the one who can kill the body, but fear the one who can kill both body and soul in hell. And so the same idea, Jesus knows, either comforts you or it terrifies you. Which one is it for you this morning? You know, there's beauty in the gospel. Romans chapter 5, if you want to turn over there, Romans chapter 5 and verse 8. Romans, the 5th chapter. And really, let's just go ahead and read some more of this real quick. Romans chapter 5, and we'll begin in verse 6. Romans chapter 5, beginning in verse 6. For while we were still helpless, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for the good man someone would dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than having now been justified by His blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through Him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of His Son, much more, having been reconciled, we shall be saved by His life. And not only this, but we exult in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received the reconciliation. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men, because all sinned. Now, when you tie that into the rest of Romans chapter 1 dealing with the Jews being guilty of sin, Romans chapter 2, the Gentiles being guilty of sin, and Romans chapter 3, all have sinned. And recognizing that sin separates us from God, it fits in right here with Romans chapter 6. There's the beauty of it. We are all guilty of sin. And while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were His enemies, Christ died for us. And so He reveals this idea of knowing us not in order just to shame us, but to show us His love. Sometimes people have asked, well, why did Jesus have to go through the torment of the cross? Oh, why did He have to die and suffer in that way? Why couldn't He have just lived to old age? Yeah, somebody could have came to this world and died of old age. But somebody who suffered in the way that Jesus did, the beatings, the mockings, the trials, the crucifixion in and of itself, that showed a greater love, knowing that that sacrifice had to be made, than somebody who came to this world and just died of old age. Somebody who was willing to suffer to the 10th degree shows a love beyond comparison. And yet we were His enemies. We were in sin. We had done wrong against Him. He knew your sin. He knew about your rebellion. He knew that many of them were going to reject Him, and yet He still came and died. He still went to the cross. He did not wait for you to be worthy to go to the cross. And then you go over to Romans chapter 6, beginning in verse 3. Or do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus have been baptized into his death, therefore having been buried with him through baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in the newness of life. For if we have become united with him in this likeness of death, of his death, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection. That's how we obey the gospel according to 2 Thessalonians. You think about obeying the gospel, and you think about what the gospel is. The gospel is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. How do we go about doing that? You see that right here in Romans chapter 6. The one who knows you completely. The one who gives you a way to be made new. If you're willing to die to sin. If you're willing to be buried with him in the waters of baptism and to walk in that newness of life, being risen up out of that watery grave. And so this morning, I hope you know that Jesus knows. He knows your faithfulness. He knows your suffering. He knows your condition. He knows your sin. But yet he still loves you. He still wants you to come to him. He still died for you. He still calls you to come home. And so the question is not, does Jesus know me? The question that I want you to think about this morning is, what will I do knowing that he does know me? Will you come to him? Will you trust in him? Will you make him the king of your life? Will you make him the king of your heart? Will you continue to keep him as the king of this local body, the church? Will you obey him? Because the one who knows you completely is the one that invites you to come. If there's anything that the members here or the eldership can do for you this morning to help you be right with God, I know that they would be more than happy to do that. Whether you need the prayers of the Christians here, whether you need to be baptized for the remission of sins and make your life right. If there's anything that they can do, if you just need a call or a text throughout the week of encouragement, I know that they'd be happy to do it. Whatever they can do to encourage and admonish you and help you live that life that you know you ought to live, whatever we can do, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.